Okay, so we all know BB. Good old balloon boy, that's what BB stands for. But then, what does JJ mean? Jaloon, Jurl, and Dee? Is that Daloon non-binary? No, we actually know that one. It stands for Dee. For the longest times, the names of Five Nights at Freddy's characters have been a fun assortment of good, bad, completely unknown, or entirely arbitrary, and I've thoroughly enjoyed that ride. Since Help Wanted, the chaotic mess of FNAF character names has been kind of tamed down, but I still find it interesting to look at all the weird naming decisions that have been made throughout this game series. For example, the core four, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, are all solid names. No complaints here, officer. But funnily enough, these four already started the pattern of fun origins for names because these were originally placeholder nicknames during development that just ended up sticking around to release. Though, since these guys have shown up in basically every game, they keep slapping these newfangled adjectives in front of their names to set each iteration apart from one another. Basically, every group of these four have to have their own quirky group name, even when all four of them aren't there. And for the most part, people don't think of all of these as Freddy Fazbear. FNAF 1 has Freddy Fazbear, but every other game has Freddy with an adjective in front of it. This isn't Freddy Fazbear, that's his cousin, Fancy Freddy. Which can make it feel like each version of the animatronics are entirely separate characters even when they aren't, and that certainly isn't helped by the complete lack of visual design consistency between games. Though, honestly, the concept of specifying which version of a character it is with simple descriptors in the name is fine. It's essentially the same as saying Freddy Fazbear parentheses FNAF 4 closed parentheses, like Lego Star Wars trying to distinguish between 15 different Luke Skywalker outfits. And this pattern only really started in FNAF 2 because there were multiple Freddys in that one game, so we needed to specify which one we were talking about. The problem is just overabundance and overuse. For fans just talking about these games, these descriptors are great and even necessary, but the franchise itself doesn't often need to do that. It's getting to the point where every single game feels the need to add a whole new identity to Freddy and the gang. In custom night menus, sure, but why would the in-universe entertainment company making Funtime Freddy name him Funtime Freddy instead of just Freddy Fazbear like he's always been called? Ballora isn't Funtime Ballora, so it's not even consistent. I'm just glad that the attempts to introduce things like Shadow Puppet as a separate character haven't really stuck in fan discussion because, like, this guy does not need a distinct name. One thing I do like thinking about with all this, though, is that with enough FNAF games, we might run out of new descriptors. We had Withered as the only type of damaged animatronic for a long time, but Security Breach gave us Shattered and then Ruined, which, honestly, Ruined is pretty nice because it's from, you know, Ruin, so that one's cute, I like that. But we also have Shadow, Phantom, and Nightmare that are all pretty similar themes. Although, I guess Shadow is a bad example because technically there's only one Shadow animatronic that's actually named that. Shadow Freddy? Yeah, sure, that's Shadow Freddy, but Shadow Bonnie? No, that's actually RWQFSFASXC. Unlike most cases in FNAF history, Shadow Bonnie is a time where a fan name stuck as the most popular name even after the real name was revealed. I mean, not that it doesn't make sense. Nobody's gonna say RWQF whatever in casual conversation. That doesn't mean it's a horribly bad official name, just a silly one. What does mean it's a bad official name is that Shadow Freddy doesn't follow the same naming scheme. I mean, Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie were both just fan names originally, but Bonnie gets the keyboard smash? But hey, I at least respect that they're actually sticking to the official name and not letting fan names override it, because that's pretty common with every other FNAF character. Since FNAF isn't really a dialogue-heavy series, at least early on, it makes sense that there's not a lot of chances to drop the lore on a character's official name, especially when there's a lot of strange entities that logically wouldn't even have one. But leaving a fanbase that needs a separate name for each alteration of every character with no name at all obviously means we've got some gaps to fill. It's actually the filling of such gaps that gave us the name creation patterns that carry through FNAF as a whole. I mean, the whole adjective plus name thing could partially be attributed to FNAF 2 introducing the toy animatronics, plus fans calling the old clanksters withered, despite the game itself just calling them Fred & Co. But even before that, fans were the ones that called this Golden Freddy, paving the way for an eternal bond of bear and adjective. Though, again, you can't really pin the blame entirely on this. FNAF keeping up these types of names and adopting them as the official names was an intentional choice. And besides, I'd gladly take the name Golden Freddy over the alternative option we could have had. You see, in the recent of times, the art of making up something from scratch has been dying a bit in favor of just checking out the code of the game. Every game asset's gotta have a name, whether that's a placeholder or not doesn't really matter. For example, the name Glitchtrap came from data mining. Obviously, there wouldn't really be a good chance to drop the official name of a character that isn't even supposed to exist in-game, so fans did a mining sesh in the datacombs and came out with a placeholder name from the game assets. However, we know that Glitchtrap wouldn't have been its official name if it didn't become popular with fans, because even Scott Cawthon doesn't like that as a name.
So I love the idea of Glitchtrap. I'm not a huge fan of the name.
So if we had that same attitude back in FNAF 1, Golden Freddy would have been called Yellow Bear, which just sucks as a name. I feel like the introduction of Fredbear in FNAF 4 was an attempt to give Golden Freddy an official name. Just because Fredbear never caught on as a name replacement for him doesn't mean it wasn't an attempt, but FNAF 4 was at least able to get the jump on Fredbear's partner in crime. Spring Bonnie. I'll be honest, I thought Spring Bonnie was a fan name for years, and I thought it was one of the dumbest fan names yet. Oh, it's like Bonnie, but also he's the original version of Springtrap, so let's call him Spring Bonnie. It doesn't even make sense as a partner named a Fredbear. If we were following the same logic of just taking the first half of Freddy and then slapping the animal name Bear on the end, we'd get Bon Bunny. Or, Bon Bun, which, well, that conflicts with Funtime Freddy's little guy, but it would have been a much better name, alright? Anyway, that's all to say that I'm not a huge fan of the name Spring Bonnie, though it could always be worse. Instead of calling more recent appearances of this yellow rabbit Springtrap or Spring Bonnie, they've been officially referring to him as Yellow Rabbit. Now, the name was somewhat redeemed for me when I realized that calling him Yellow Rabbit perfectly mirrors the old name of Golden Freddy being Yellow Bear. That's a pretty neat connection that probably took me way too long to realize, but I didn't like Yellow Bear as a name either, and nobody even calls him that, so this doesn't exactly fix anything. The thing is, in cases where fan names are popular, they're usually just adopted as the real thing, or they're so ingrained in the fanbase already that the real name is effectively ignored. But then there's fan names that are obviously placeholder and easily replaced by official names, like Purple Guy! Or more recently, Phone Guy. Yellow Rabbit and Spring Bonnie always felt like placeholder names, just waiting for a better, more official name to come along. So I think they could probably be easily replaced by a good enough fan name. But on the topic of obviously placeholder names for characters, I've gotta talk about the king of begging for an official name, the Crying Child. Crying Child was the most placeholder fan name of all time because people knew for a long time that this stupid book probably held the answers to what his real name was. And yet, it remained elusive for way longer than anyone thought it ever would. Crying Child is a pretty unique case when it comes to important characters with no official name reveal because he's always struggled to keep a name stuck to him. Sure, Crying Child was used commonly enough that you could see it as an unofficial name that stuck, but I think ever since the Survival Logbook release, there was a general dissatisfaction with keeping that as his name. The first attempt at finding a proper name in the book led us to Evan, and normally that'd just stick fully. I mean, it's a valid name, and for some people, Evan was good enough. But most theorists wouldn't let that slide because the logic needed to get there seemed too flawed to accept. But finally, 7 years after the book's release, people have seemingly settled on the ever-enticing option, Dave. Or maybe the name Cassidy is the crying child and Dave is the other one or something. You can never be too certain with FNAF. But ultimately, especially when it comes to names, what people collectively decide to believe is far more important than the actual truth. So now we have Dave, or a David, and I guess we're gonna stick with that. I mean, I remember seeing the name originally proposed and everyone being like, yep, that makes sense, good job, but I haven't heard the name actually in use too much outside of that, so maybe it's just taken a bit to catch on. Though these kinds of placeholder names really only happened in FNAFs 1 through 4. Starting with Sister Location, there seemed to be a deliberate attempt to give us names for most characters. Around the time between FNAF 4 and Sister Location is when those theory-plaguing booksters started ramping things up in the lore department. And just in general, FNAF 4 started shifting the series from just having an implied story hidden in the background to a much more direct plot. As such, it became a lot harder to avoid giving characters names. You can't exactly spend a whole book talking about a serial killer and only ever describing him as a purple guy. You gotta drop a name at some point. Game-wise, Sister Location started off strong with the death of fan-favorite FNAF character Vincent, by directly confirming that Purple Guy's name is William Afton, which was a good choice to directly show the name of such an important character in the games themselves, instead of just leaving it to the books. But Sister Location also gave us Michael Afton's name in dialogue.
It's me, Michael.
Pizzeria Simulator confirmed Henry's name, kinda, and Elizabeth's.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth.
Honestly, things ended up flipping in terms of name confirmations. In the earlier FNAF games, we knew all of the animatronics names, usually from phone calls or custom night menus, but none of the human names. Then Sister Location and Beyond started giving us all the human names in cutscenes and dialogue while phasing out custom nights, so we don't know as many animatronic names. Like, while Pizza Sim gave us some key human character names, we didn't know the name of any of the animatronics we encountered at night except for Lefty, who was in the shopping catalog. Ultimate Custom Night fixed this to varying degrees of success. Scrap Baby and Molten Freddy seem to have stuck fully in the fan-base lexicon of names, but prior to that, they were fan-named Freak Show Freddy and Freak Show Baby, which, honestly, pretty sick names, but the current ones are good too. What didn't stick was Afton, because that's not a very helpful name. William Afton is already the name of the alive guy. He then becomes Springtrap. Why would we go back to calling him Afton again after that? Look, Afton is a cool villain name, I won't deny that, and so is Springtrap, but most people don't like his Pizza Sim design, so they really needed a way to differentiate him from every other iteration of the character, meaning he gets the name Scraptrap by fans. Sorry UCN, your official name sucked. After Ultimate Custom Night, Help Wanted kept up the pattern of naming the humans, but not the... well, I guess this isn't an animatronic, but he certainly wasn't named. Also, Vanessa's name was actually revealed in Special Delivery, not Help Wanted, but Help Wanted did give us the name Jeremy, and... God, Jeremy, you don't even want to get me started on repeated names in this franchise, because I don't have a whole lot to say on that. But the real heavy hitter of official names is Security Breach, giving us a name for every character it reasonably could. This only left Burntrap and the Blob to be named by fans because, I mean, they're barely even acknowledged in dialogue. Freddy just lets ya walk right past this giant spaghetti monster of animatronic parts. Of course they're not gonna drop the name if they don't even talk about them. However, when the Ultimate Character Guide dropped, there was still an effort to make sure these fan names don't stick by at least being like, hey, this is not the official name. We still won't tell you what the official name is though. That just meant people started treating those names like the placeholder names of old, ready to be replaced by any other official info. In Burntrap's case, that meant being called the Mimic now, though people still use Burntrap to refer to this specific iteration of the Mimic, which is fair, I guess. And for the Blob, people took the other method of fan naming, going into the code, which revealed the codename The Tangle, so that's an option that not a lot of people use still, but that's FNAF's fault for not just using the official guide to reveal the real name. When else are we gonna get a chance to learn what that thing's called? I also want to point out somewhat of an effort from Security Breach to fight back against the adjective plus name format for naming Freddy and the gang. In the intro, they say Freddy Fazbear instead of Glamrock Freddy, which makes much more sense in universe that the Pizzaplex would advertise the actual name of their mascot instead of an adjective slapped in front of his first name. Okay, they do say Glamrock Chica literally right before that, but hey, they're working on it. And to be honest, having it say Chica Chicken would be really weird. Montgomery Gator, Roxanne Wolf, both fine. Chica Chicken? Horrifically cursed, so I'll take Glamrock Chica in this case. Security Breach also has another fun name quirk with the daycare attendant. The individual names of Sun and Moon are a little boring for such, beloved characters, so some people pushed for other options like Sunny and Moony as just cuter nicknames, or Sundrop and Moondrop, which were based off of these posters for DCA-themed candy. However, the cold, unfeeling heart of lore fans chugged onwards with the official names of just Sun and Moon. It's not as easy popularizing a new name for your little baby girls that already have an official one, but at least DCA fans got their Eclipse name. Ultimately, FNAF's name situation is, the situation is insane. I think the pattern of slapping a new group adjective on the core 4 animatronics with each possible permutation of their design is a bit much. I mean, it's fine for fans who really need to distinguish each one for their own discussions, but the problem is that it becomes too much of an expectation for all fan discussion to the point that each name starts to feel like an entirely separate character. Even if FNAF 1 Freddy and FNAF 2 Withered Freddy are both the same thing, they feel separate. That's not entirely the fault of the name, mind you. It's also the fact that the designs always change between games, and FNAF itself likes to treat them as separate characters for products and such. But I've already talked about the overall confusion caused by this more in depth in a previous video, so I won't harp on about it too much. Other than that, I think FNAF names are just fun to think about. Nearly every name in the early titles has its own set of wacky trivia about its origin, from fans or code placeholders or secret puzzles in children's activity books. The fact that so many names were originally just fan names that were adopted into canon is cool.
Hello, purple guy.
I can act all high and mighty about how it's bad for story clarity now or something, but ultimately, it's a fun way to interact with fans. That's kind of the catch of FNAF. There was never an expectation of it getting so large and expansive until it already was, so a lot of decisions early on were made just for fun, not thinking about how it'd impact this mega franchise years down the line. If anything, that early approach to the story is what's made FNAF such a uniquely interesting game series to theorize over and experience. I suppose that's a bit beyond the scope of just names, but if you made it this far into the video, I just want to make sure your takeaway is that none of this really matters, it's just fun to think about.